Hello friends and welcome back to Abridged by Alpal. This time coming to you from my parents' house where I'm at for the holiday break. Today I'm going to be tier ranking the books that I read in 2025. Now I'm not going to do all of them because some of them are part of really long series and I just feel like I can't differentiate between some of the books, but any that I can differentiate between I've included in my list. Now I will be doing this on my iPad, so I'll probably look down for a lot of this video, but it's going to be fine because I should just be really small in the corner of your screen if everything goes right. Perfect, let's get started. So starting off, we've got Demon Copperhead, which is actually the last book that I finished in 2025. I finished it like 2 days ago. It's a really good book, don't get me wrong, but it was really heavy and dark. And I think it was a good book for me to read. Like it was a lesson I needed to learn, a perspective that I probably would not have known anything about. It was a lot. I finished it at night and I was just like, oh my gosh, the next book I read has got to be lighter. It has to, lift the spirits instead of pulling them down. But like I said, I think it was a really important story to read. So for that, I'm going to put it in my A tier. All right, Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. Now, I read the first 3 books in Red Rising several years ago, but I had heard from a lot of people that the second half of the series isn't worth it. You should skip it, blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't originally read them. I always kind of had it in the back of my head that I might get back to it because I loved it so much, but it definitely wasn't a priority until I knew that I was going to have the opportunity to meet Pierce Brown, and then I was like, okay, I gotta finish the books. I can't be a fake fan. Initially reading it, I wasn't like, that was an awful book, but then after reading Dark Age and Lightbringer, and then reflecting back on the series as a whole, I was like, yeah, Iron Gold was not that good. I thought it was really funny when they were going through the crowd and having everyone cheer for their favorite book. And, there's more cheers, I think, for like the first one, maybe Golden Sun as well. And then it gets to Iron Gold and literally no one, and this is a crowd of hundreds of people, no one makes a sound. And Pierce Brown just goes, yeah, no, I get it. It's fine. So it wasn't awful, but the more I've sat with it and realized in the context of the series that it just doesn't really hold up as well, I've been like, oh yeah, that was fine. So I'll put this on my C tier. But I'd like to make it very clear that that's just Iron Gold and does not reflect how I feel about the series as a whole. Okay, The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I read A Song of Ice and Fire last year and I loved it so much, and I heard from a lot of people on the internet and from friends that if you like A Song of Ice and Fire and you like the grimdark genre, that you have to read Joe Abercrombie and his First Law trilogy. So I was really excited. I wanted to fill that hole in my life that was A Song of Ice and Fire, and so I read the first one and was just so disappointed by it. I don't like how the characters are like constantly witty. Like at some point it's just like, oh, and then they cracked a joke, and then they cracked another joke, and then they killed some people, and then cracked some more jokes, and I was just like, oh, it doesn't actually feel grim nor dark. So this is probably my biggest disappointment of 2025. And for that, it's going in D. D stands for disappointment. The Exile by Ryan Cahill. So I have included all of the novellas for The Bound and the Broken because they're quite short and each one tells a very distinct story, so it is really easy for me to remember what they're about and how much I enjoyed the story. I do not care for Dane that much. It's not that I think he's a bad character, and it's not like I'm like, oh, let's just move past his scenes. It's just I haven't really formed an attachment to him at all. I know someone else who's reading the series as well, and they like him fine, so I think it's just like a me thing. Like my personality doesn't match with his personality, whatever it is. I don't really care. So The Exile isn't my most favoritist of the novellas that he's written. However, Belina does play a big part in this story, and I do love Belina, and I love the dynamic that she has with Dane, like that whole concept of found family. She very begrudgingly admits that she loves Dane and that they're family, and I just thought that that was really endearing. I mean, she's got such a baddie attitude, and then for that, I'm just like, ah ha ha. All said and done though, I think I'm gonna put this right after Iron Gold. Is it a C tier though? It's still good in the way that it adds depth to the characters and the world, and it's short, so it's like, how bad can it really be if you don't have to sit with it for that long? But I'm gonna be true to myself and I'm gonna put this in C. Okay, next up we've got Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I had actually started this a full year before I finished it, which was my fault. It is not a long book, I just wasn't super into it. Despite being a spy novel, there's not actually a lot of action in it. It's a lot of reflecting on past events and trying to piece together something that no one really knows about. And so it's not very gripping, but it was fun to read something that was outside of what I usually read. So I definitely enjoyed it. And, I felt a little bit more cultured when I finished it because I feel like this is a classic people talk about a lot. I think this is just like a solid B tier. It's not like particularly outstanding, but it is definitely a good read and worth it. Awesome. So next up is Martha Wells' Murderbot, the series as a whole. Although I've only read the first 3, it's kind of like a palate cleanser in between books. Remember when I said like I needed something lighthearted after Demon Copperhead? This is what I read. I was surprised going into this how much brevity it has and how fun it is. I wasn't really expecting that for a series called Murderbot, but it is, it's good. It's just happy. And I think it's definitely a solid A tier for sure. This next one's pretty fun. It's actually a book that was written by an old friend of mine. I had read his first one a year or 2 ago, so he came back and asked if I would be willing to read this one as well. Now, urban fantasy is not really my favorite, but for a friend, I'm willing to do pretty much anything. I started reading it and then was very pleasantly surprised by how much I actually enjoyed the story and how much I wanted to know what was going on and where the characters were going to go next. I don't know if I'm really biased for this, but I'm gonna put it in the A just because, it was written by a friend and I enjoyed it so much more than I expected, and I love that surprise. All right, we got The Will of the Many. I actually did include both of the books that are in this series so far because I read them both this year and I liked them the same amount but for very different reasons. Now, I was surprised when I opened up this book and it kind of felt like a Hunger Games or a Red Rising. With a title like The Will of the Many, I was expecting something very epic in proportion. But the first book is actually quite limited in scope. Like there's not actually a lot at stake, or there's not a lot that the reader feels is at stake. But what it does excellently is set up everything for book 2. And in book 2, there's a lot at stake. Really quick, I'm going to switch Murderbot to the beginning of A, and I'm doing that because I'm going to put The Will of the Many here. Yeah, I'm going to put this before Murderbot. The Fall was by far my favorite novella from The Bound and the Broken. I think it was such a cool story to tell and such an interesting perspective to tell it from. When Ryan Cahill was talking about why he includes these novellas, he talked about how he wanted there to be an anthology to make the world feel very complicated and real, and like anything can happen and many things do happen that we don't usually see on the page. So I think The Fall, stunning work, does that beautifully, and yeah, like I said, by far my favorite of the novellas that he wrote. Okay, next we have This Inevitable Ruin from the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. The thing that my coworkers like the most about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that it starts off so fun to lure people in, but then it gets really real and starts like actually teaching life lessons, which you would not expect from a series called Dungeon Crawler Carl. Now, myself, I don't really love what's going on off-world in Dungeon Crawler Carl. I think that the dungeon is the most interesting thing that's going on, and it's because I'm here to read Dungeon Crawler Carl for entertainment purposes only. That being said, it's not bad. I still love what Matt Dinniman is doing with the series, and I'm super excited to see where it goes. Now, finding a spot for this is going to be hard because it's still Dungeon Crawler Carl and it's still fun, but not as fun as some of the other ones. So I think this is going to go beginning of C. We'll see where this ends up by the end of the video. Okay, on to the next, The Golden Compass. I read this book because I wanted to go back and reread some of the books I read as a kid. I very vividly remember reading The Golden Compass, but then when I was reading it again this year, I don't remember anything that happened. Like, I remember the experience of reading it, I don't remember the content of reading it. Surprisingly heavy for a children's series, but I also respect what the author is exploring and the what ifs that he's pursuing. For me, this is a pretty easy beginning of B. Ooh, okay, up next, I've mentioned this before, I'm only halfway through Malazan, Book of the Fallen, but so far I've been loving everything. I think that the story the author is trying to tell is so vast and complicated, and he's still doing it so well, so major props for that. When I heard about Malazan, the way that it was described to me was it's a series about a land and not people. So when I started reading it, I really was not expecting there to be many recurring characters. I thought that it was going to read a little bit more like Fire and Blood and it was going to move on really quickly, but that's not the case, and I'm very happy about that. The characters that are introduced in Gardens of the Moon are not the characters I'm most excited to hear about now that I'm further along in the series. But given that this is the only representative for Malazan Book of the Fallen, I'm still gonna put it pretty high up in my A tier. Yeah, let's put that right before Murderbot. I feel good about that. Okay, now some of you guys might be thinking, Lord of Chaos, Allie, what a random book. Why did you throw that in? It's very middle of the series, blah 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 blah. The reason why I've included Lord of Chaos is because for me it was the turning point in the Wheel of Time. I definitely enjoyed books 1 through 5, but by book 6 I was so invested in the characters and the stories that were being told and seeing how things were going to turn out and fall apart. Now, full disclosure, I don't actually remember what happens in Lord of Chaos. I just remember it being the book where I went from liking the series to loving the series, and that's why it's included on my list for 2025. And maybe this is a little bit unfair, but I am going to put it at the beginning of B just because I don't remember what it was talking about, but I remember liking it. Okay, next I've got The Strength of the Few. As I said earlier, I included this one because I enjoyed it just as much as The Will of the Many, but for very different reasons. The way I like to describe it is same amount, different flavors. The Strength of the Few is where things start really ramping up in scale, and there's a lot more at stake. Now, I've talked to some people that don't like the format of The Strength of the Few as much because it's a little more disjointed, but I actually really enjoyed it and how the author told the stories in that way. To stay true to myself, I'm gonna have to put it right next to The Will of the Many. Just ignore the fact that it's after it. They are completely equal in my mind, but I'm just gonna put it in publication order because why not? Oh my gosh! Okay, I love New Spring so much. I'm actually a huge fan of Tower Politics in the Wheel of Time series, and that's a lot of what New Spring is. It's setting up how convoluted it can be, and then starting that journey of Lan and Moraine going to the two rivers, and I just like the way that it shows how easy it is to trip up and kind of like lose your footing in the world, and also just like young Moraine and Lan, what a pair. I love them so much. So this is an easy S tier for me, but it's gonna go after The Fall because The Fall is just, it's almost the perfect novella, and I'm saying almost because nothing is perfect. Speaking of The Bound and the Broken, we've got Of War and Ruin, which is book 3 in the Bound and the Broken series. Now, this might be a little bit weird, kind of like Lord of Chaos. It's on this list because one of the characters it focuses on more than the other books do is like my favorite character. This is gonna be really complicated to say, so I hope I get it right. My favorite character parallels another character in the Wheel of Time that I did not care for. In fact, those storylines, I was like, can we please just move past it? I don't care. I almost wanted to skip those chapters. However, Ryan Cahill turns that storyline on its head so well and turns it into something beautiful and something I actually enjoyed reading. And so that's why Of War and Ruin sticks out in my head, because I love spending extra time with that character in particular. S tier. Woo! Okay, this next one, I love Jane Austen, but reading Emma was not my favorite Jane Austen experience. I started the book with my sister and my sister-in-law, but I think I might be the only person that finished it. In this case, I think maybe my sister-in-law had read it before. I find the character Emma so frustrating because she's just got her head in the sand and she seems very happy to leave it there. And yes, it is still Jane Austen, but I think I would pick any of her other 5 novels over Emma if I had to. So for me, this is gonna go at the end of C just because of all the Jane Austen I've read, which has been 5 of the 6 novels, it wasn't my favorite. I don't even know how to introduce Sunrise on the Reaping. You guys know that I love Hunger Games. It's my favorite series of all time. My headcanon is that Suzanne Collins keeps writing stories in the Hunger Games series because readers, maybe even myself included, are not learning the lesson that violence is not a spectacle and it should not be any form of entertainment. And I do feel that Sunrise on the Reaping is just drilling that message into readers' heads. I remember being 10 pages into the book and something awful happens and I just go, oh my gosh, that's so messed up. And then everything that happens after that, literally every major event after that, is worse. And I expected it at some point to taper off, but it doesn't. It's so bleak and depressing and is a lot, definitely a lot. but the story itself is not that like compelling. I think maybe the best way to describe Sunrise on the Reaping is I was watching a Studio Ghibli recently, and it's just very apparent that the events are not nearly as important as the character development. And I think that is the style of storytelling that's going on in Sunrise in the Reaping. The events are horrific, but what's most important is the character development and how Haymitch becomes the person that we know in the main trilogy. This one's also going to be hard. I think I'm going to put it right in between these two. A little bit of backstory on this next one. I went to Spain in May with my mom and my best friend because my sister was doing the Camino de Santiago. I read Walking with Sam as a way to understand what the Camino means to people who do the full thing and to understand what our leg of the journey was going to be like. Unfortunately, in this book, he describes the Meseta, which is the part that we did, as being horrible and just like a trial for both him and his son to go through. So it made me really scared when I went to Spain. But the Meseta was actually perfect for us because we were there in May, and so it was perfectly pleasant when we started off every single day, and it was flat, which is great because I did not want to deal with inclines. So as a whole, Walking with Sam was just a very cute, uplifting story about a father and a son, and I definitely enjoyed reading it. For me, this is going to go... yeah, I'm going to put it in between Golden Compass and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy because it was definitely a little more entertaining than Tinker Tailor. Okay, up next I've got Of Blood and Fire, which is the first book in the Bound and the Broken series. Now, I feel like this is a dead horse that I just keep beating, but I do really, really love this series. My family, being as nerdy as we are, did book presentations, which was supposed to be like a competition of who read the most interesting book in 2025, but ended up being like everyone just wants to talk about their book. Let's not try to pick a winner, which I thought was lame because I'm competitive and I want to win things. But The Bound and the Broken was a series that I picked to present on. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's not much more that I can say that I haven't already said about The Bound and the Broken. I highly recommend it. I think that if you like The Wheel of Time, you should go and read it. This one also feels like a pretty solid S tier for me. The first book started off a lot like The Wheel of Time, and I was a little bit scared about it at first. I love it for its similarities to The Wheel of Time, but then I also love it more for telling its own story and going on a different path. Up next is another one of my all-time favorites. I read Alchemized a few years ago and came back to it when it was traditionally published. The author did such a phenomenal job taking this fan fiction set in the Harry Potter world and giving it its own legs to run on, and it's beautiful. And it's a standalone, which is even more amazing to be able to do that much world building and get readers so invested in the characters in a single book. I think this one very safely sits in between Of War and Ruin and Of Blood and Fire. Up next, I've got Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson. This was the standalone that he released this year. I really appreciate that Brandon Sanderson wasn't scared to go back and retell a story that's already been told. He fleshed out the world so much more and gave it all more meaning, as well as I feel like this is the perfect opening of the door to the Cosmere as a whole. I know that there have been other big Cosmere moments in the other books, but this is the first time where it kind of hit me in the face of how big this is all going to be and how excited I am for it. All that being said, it's not my favorite standalone. I believe some of my hesitation is because I was burned by the MCU upping the stakes too much, and I have more faith in Brandon Sanderson for being able to deliver since he's a single person with very specific goals in mind. But I do just like I'm trying to protect myself a little bit more because I don't want the MCU crash and burn to happen to the Cosmere. That would be so devastating for me. Now, to give this a spot on my list, it's gonna be an A or B tier for sure. I'll throw this at the top of the B tier. Alrighty, Onyx Storm was another story I was a little bit disappointed by this year. I really enjoyed reading Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. The story is compelling and I thought could be very entertaining, but as each book comes out, I've enjoyed them a little bit less. I'll definitely finish the series, read the next books as they come out, but if it keeps going in the way that it's going, I fear I'm not gonna love it. So Onyx Storm also gets a D for disappointed. Less disappointed than the Blade itself though, for sure. Ooh, and I fear that we're in kind of a downer time because I'm looking at the next 3 of them, and they're definitely not my favorites. Jade City is another story that I picked up because people were singing praises for the author, said that she was really turning sci-fi and fantasy on its head, and so I was really excited about it. But as I read it, I learned that I don't really love urban fantasy, and so I feel bad for putting this in the C tier because it's not its fault. I do believe it's a beautifully crafted book. It's just not my flavor of book that I enjoy. But hey, I think I still enjoyed it more than Emma. And more than The Exile. Okay, so not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Speaking of downers, we can just keep this bad time going. The Ice is a beautiful short story. It definitely has its place in the Bound and the Broken anthology because it is the events immediately leading up to where book 1 starts. So I do think it was a very important story to be told, but it is just so sad. Like, characters are dying left and right, and so I was like really stressed for all 3 hours of listening to the audiobook of this one. I like to choose to be happy, and this was not that. I feel bad that Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy just keeps getting bumped down and down and down on the B tier, but it is what it is. Moving on to the next one, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I definitely enjoyed reading this book, but I feel like when I finished it, closed the last page, I kind of found myself asking, why was this a story that needs to be told? It was fun and dark and light and heavy at the same time, but I did not feel like it added to the broader world of Westeros. And there was nothing in particular that happened where I was like, oh my gosh, we know how that's going to turn out. That's going to be a disaster. It was just kind of like, yeah, fun, let's go follow these adventures and then the story can be done. So this is probably another disappointment, but I enjoyed it far more than Onyx Storm. So top of D for sure. And now that we've got those bummers out of the way, we have A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I've said this before, so I don't think this is going to be news to anyone, but I do find myself during action sequences kind of blacking out or not really being locked in or understanding all of the nuances of what's going on. And so A Memory of Light is on my list because it was not that. The whole book is pretty much just one battle, and I was there for every single page, for every single moment that happened on it. I thought it was such a beautiful ending to the series. I love that Brandon Sanderson got all of Robert Jordan's notes and said, well, I can't read his mind and know what he was going to cut from these notes, so I won't cut any of it at all. And then it became way more books than it was supposed to be. But that's pretty on par for Sanderson. This is surprising me just a little bit, but I think this is actually going to be my top read of 2025. And I know you're like, oh my gosh, Allie, there's 2 more. These ones are honorable mentions because I'm currently reading them and I'm trying to finish them by the end of the year, but given that it's 10 o'clock on the 29th, I probably won't. However, if I had to project into my 2026, how much do I expect that I'm going to enjoy both of these series? I actually think I would put them both in the A. Once again, for very different reasons. The Sun Eater series, Empire of Silence, is very Dune, and I love that. Sci-fi is not an itch that is easily scratched for me, so when I find something that is doing the job, I'm really excited about it, and so far that's what it is. I'm about a quarter of the way through. Children of Blood and Bone was a series I probably never would have picked up on my own. I didn't really know if it was going to be my kind of story, but then as soon as I opened it up and started reading it and meeting the characters, I was like, oh yeah, I was totally wrong about this. I'm so excited. So same thing, about a quarter of the way through that book, but I think both of them are just gonna be really, really solid reads to finish in 2026. So those are my 2025 books. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching me kind of reflect on these stories and the way that they've impacted me in this last year. I have a lot of really awesome things coming up for 2026. I'm super excited to pick up the Malazan series again, to finish Sun Eater and Children of Blood and Bone, as well as pick up any number of standalones or new series that are released in 2026, because I'll be honest with you, I'm very much a vibe reader and not going in chronological order of when I put books on my TBR. I also hope you guys really enjoyed my shirt. I'll lean over this way. This was a gift that I was given from my mom on the suggestion of my sister. I think it's awesome. My sister said that she saw someone in one of her classes wearing it and she was like, it's long sleeve, it's green, and it's Avatar. Allie's gonna love this, and she was so right. I love the shirt so much. And hopefully fellow nerds enjoy the shirt as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye! Let's do another nail shout out because I love these ones so much. I don't know if that's going to focus at all. Boom, there we go. So the base color for this one is Misery is My Favorite Color by Mooncat, and then the stars on it are Avatar State from the Mooncat and Avatar The Last Airbender collaboration. Fun fact, the stars are glow in the dark. I've actually never tried to do stars on myself before, so I'm very, very, very happy with the way that they turned out, even the ones on my right hand, because I'm not left-handed and they are still recognizable as stars. So I love these nails. They're so much fun. Once again, Mooncat, sponsor me, please. I can do books and nails. Those are interests that definitely overlap for many people, right? Okay, bye. Hey Siri, text Dad.
What would you like to say?
Can you turn it down a little bit? Period. I'm picking it up on my microphone. Oh. My back hurts and I just started. Was it particularly profound? Definitely not, but oh no, that's so mean. Oh my gosh. How many times am I gonna have to do one outro to get it right?